Marina Hale always believed the ocean was quiet at night, until the first time she heard it breathing beneath her window. The sound wasn't wind or waves or any storm she could explain. It was slow, wet, rhythmic. Like something immense was sleeping just under the surface, dragging water through lungs that shouldn't exist. And the longer she listened, the more certain she became that the breathing wasn't random. It was matching hers. I was night fishing alone on the rotting pier outside my small coastal town, the kind of place where the ocean always sounded louder than the people. I had been coming here since childhood, but that night the sea felt wrong from the very first minute. The water was too flat, too obedient, like a sheet of dark glass pretending to be calm. The air was thick and unmoving. The crickets had stopped. Even the rusted lighthouse far down the coast wasn't groaning like it usually did when the wind cut across the rocks. It was a silence that wasn't empty. It was waiting. I set my tackle box beside me and dipped my line into the black. No ripples, no fish movement, just the slow, heavy breathing of deep water. I told myself it was a slow night, but the stillness began to tighten around me like a physical thing. Minutes passed, maybe longer, and then I heard it. Faint at first, as if my mind mistook it for memory. A voice. Not words. Just a feminine hum, soft enough to be confused with the tide at a distance, but too controlled to be nature. It rose slowly, like something rising to the surface, then fell again, like sinking back down. It came in pulses that matched the small waves licking the shore. I froze, listening with my entire body. There were no boats, no people, no radios, nothing in miles. The sound did not travel from far away. It came from below. I leaned over the railing, my heart slamming against my ribs. The water showed me nothing but the moon's reflection, stretched and trembling. But the deeper I focused, the clearer the voice became. It wasn't random. It moved with intention, shaping itself to the rhythm of my breath, then my pulse, as if it could sense me and wanted to sync with me. Curiosity pulled me closer to the edge. The hum shifted pitch, gentle but deliberate, like an invitation sung through teeth. I felt the hairs on my neck rise. This was not the dreamy song of storybooks. It held an awareness, a purpose, something intelligent just under the surface. I gripped the rail tighter as the melody slipped into my chest like cold fingers. For a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind, if the long nights alone had rewired something in me. But then something subtle snapped my doubt. A change in the water, a movement without a ripple, as if something huge had shifted position just beneath the pier, holding itself steady, watching. The hum paused exactly when my heartbeat spiked, as though it listened back. I didn't breathe. The pause lasted just long enough to feel like recognition. Then, directly under my feet, the ocean gently exhaled, a single bubble of warm air rising from the deep, as if something alive down there had just breathed out. I tried to convince myself I had imagined everything, but I kept returning to the pier as if something had hooked into me deeper than any line. Nights blurred together. I told myself I was looking for fish, testing patience, clearing my head. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I was waiting for that voice again. Even on nights it didn't come. The absence of it felt like pressure behind my ribs, like the silence itself was holding its breath. After one long, sleepless vigil, I decided to walk the beach at sunrise. The sky was pale silver, the water dull and tired, nothing like the black sheet it became at night. I moved slowly along the shoreline, half reading the sand for driftwood or shells, the way I used to when I was younger. That's when I saw them, scattered fragments glinting among the rocks. Not trash, not fish skin. These pieces looked alive even after being torn away. They were thin and flexible like scales, but not like anything belonging to a fish I had ever seen. They shimmered in shifting colors the way oil does when it floats on water, green, blue, violet, even hints of gold when I turned them. I bent to pick one up, and the moment I touched it, I felt a faint warmth, as if it hadn't been there long. The surface was smooth, almost wet, and it bent without breaking. I stared at it, trying to understand what animal could shed something like this in strips. There were more, dozens of them, forming a kind of broken trail across the sand. Instinct pulled me to follow it. The sea was calm, but the trail suggested struggle. The scales were not dropped, they were torn, peeled in frantic patches, as if whatever owned them had been dragged. The trail led between rocks and then stopped abruptly at the waterline. No more scales beyond that point. Just churned sand and a rough imprint as if something large had been pushed or pulled into the sea. The shape was not clean, not defined like a human body. It was long, uneven, twisting, like something that did not want to leave had fought to stay on land. That alone was enough to make me step back. Nothing from the ocean ever struggles to stay on land, but the detail that anchored itself in my throat came next. Near the last cluster of torn scales, the sand was darkened, not brown or rust-colored, but a deep, fresh red that had soaked downward so far the grains still glistened. Blood. So recent that it hadn't dried. So much of it that the trail didn't look like an animal kill. It looked like the aftermath of an abduction. The sea beside that stain was unnaturally still, as if protecting something beneath. And in the silence, with the rising sun behind me, I swear I felt eyes below the surface, watching the exact place where the blood vanished into water. I told myself I should stop coming, that nothing good waited in that water, but my body moved against my will. I returned to the pier that night with a lantern, even though every instinct screamed that light would make me visible. The boards groaned under me as I lowered myself close to the cracks between planks, letting the lantern hang by its handle so the glow spilled downward in thin stripes. The water below looked deeper than before, darker, as if the ocean floor had dropped away in my absence. For minutes, nothing moved, and I almost convinced myself I invented the scales, the blood, the voice, until the quiet began to pulse again. Not sound this time, not melody, but movement. Something large drifted just underneath the pier, slow and unhurried, like a shape that didn't need to hide because it already owned the dark. I lowered the lantern a little more. The light cracked across the surface and finally touched something below. Not a body, not a full form, just a curve of shimmer moving past, smooth and segmented like armor rather than skin. It was too big to be any fish I knew. I held my breath and leaned closer, pressing my eye to the gap between the boards to see deeper. The water stayed flat while down below something tall floated vertical, suspended without effort. Nothing natural rises upright like that. Not whales, not humans, not anything dead, only something choosing to face upward. I focused until my vision strained. First I saw only shimmer. Then beneath the shimmer something clearer resolved, not a face, just a circle of pale, reflective tissue. It took a second for my brain to name it. An eye. Not blinking, not darting, fixed straight at me. It was too large to belong to a person, too smooth to belong to a fish. The pupil was wide, drinking the lantern light. I felt a sharp cold go through me because the moment I realized it was looking at me, the water around it did not ripple. Whatever it was did not swim or rise. It simply stayed there, waiting, anchored like a statue built out of something alive. The longer I stared, the more I understood that I was not observing it. I was being measured. The eye did not express hunger or fear or curiosity. It expressed possession. Then something happened that snapped me backward in pure instinct. The eye did not blink, but the pupil contracted in a way that was not reflective but intentional, narrowing slowly as if smiling inside itself. That expression, that awareness, belonged to something that understood me too well. My hand jerked and the lantern slipped. It crashed onto the water, flame hissing out, and in the instant before the light vanished, I saw the truth in a flash. The eye was not alone. There were more, just beyond it, hundreds of them stacked in the dark like a wall of watching faces pressed silently against the underside of the pier. I stopped sleeping after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wall of eyes layered beneath the pier, not moving, not blinking, just waiting like a crowd held behind glass. When I was awake, I could still feel them, not physically, but in the same place where fear lives before it turns into shaking. Something in me changed after I saw them. The ocean was no longer a location outside my life. It had entered my head. The song I once heard through water wasn't coming from the sea anymore. It was inside my skull, faint and steady, like a vibration trapped behind bone. It didn't sound like a lure now. It sounded like suffering. A chorus of women humming through clenched teeth, as if forced to hold a note without air. The sound tightened the back of my throat until swallowing became painful. When I tried to drown it out with noise, TV, traffic, my own breathing, the internal humming only pushed harder, adapting to whatever pace my body made, sinking itself to me like a parasite calibrating its host. The strangest part was how ordinary objects started to betray me. A glass of water on the table would tremble without being touched. The drain of my sink would echo too long after the faucet shut. Puddles in the street held depth that didn't belong to their shallow size, like they opened downward into something bottomless. I would catch flashes in reflections, a curve of scale behind my shoulder in the mirror, a shape gliding beneath the surface of my bathtub, a slick tail disappearing in the blink between lightning and thunder. The visions that came with sleep were worse. I no longer dreamed in scenes, I dreamed in sensations. My body floating down, limbs weightless, hair lifting like dead grass in slow motion. Cold stone walls brushed my skin. Bone piles softened by salt pressed into my feet. The water around me was not empty. Something vast coiled in the dark, circling slowly with patience that existed outside time. I never saw its full shape, only hints, a ribbed length, a slick, muscular underside, a mouth that did not open but parted like a wound. And beneath it, in rows like chained prisoners, were the singers. Women with ruined throats whose eyes were wide, not from hypnosis but from permanent terror. Their hair drifted around them like veils, and from their mouths came that unbroken hymn of pain. I would wake gasping, nails pressed into my palms hard enough to leave blood under the skin. But the most horrifying moment didn't happen in sleep. It happened one night when the humming inside my head reached a pitch so sharp it felt like something was drilling behind my teeth. I clutched my throat in reflex and felt it. Not my pulse, not my breath. Something soft and webbed pressed from the inside against the back of my mouth, as if a hand that did not belong to me was trying to crawl out through my throat. I went back to the pier because I understood something terrible. This thing inside my head wouldn't end while I stayed away. Avoidance didn't weaken it. Distance didn't mute it. Whatever lived beneath the water had already entered me, and the pull was not external anymore. It was rooted deep in my nerves, like my own body wanted to return to whatever was calling. I didn't bring a lantern or line this time. I didn't bring a phone or shoes. I walked barefoot across the boards, feeling every splinter and nail as if the pain proved I was still human. The sea looked wrong in a different way now. Not flat. Not dead. It looked alert, like it was bracing for something to rise. The night was windless, but the water near the pier moved with slow, circular motion, as though something massive below was turning its body in anticipation. I sat at the very edge, legs dangling over the blackness, and I listened. The humming inside my head grew clearer, and for the first time I understood it was not one voice, or even many. It was a layered sound of strain, like dozens of throats forced to hold a note they didn't choose. They weren't calling me. They were warning me. That realization shifted everything. The mermaids, if that word even applied, were not hunters. They were captives. The voices didn't lure men into the water willingly. They screamed inside men to push them toward something worse below. All those scales on the beach hadn't been shed through feeding. They were torn away through restraint. The eye I saw wasn't at the creature itself. It was one of the chained things forced to look up while something else behind them controlled the dark. The water bulged near the center of the bay without breaking, like the surface was stretching over something rising. No splash, no spray, just displacement, silent and immense. My bones began to vibrate with the song, and I understood that the singers wanted me to run, but my muscles stayed obedient to the deeper command. The surface bent inward like a mouth forming a shape before opening. I leaned forward as though gravity had been reversed. Then I saw it. Not clearly, not in full, but enough to erase any concept I had of predators. The scales I found on the shore were too delicate to belong to the thing rising. What stirred beneath the water was larger than the pier itself, and its shape was wrong in every biological way. Not built like a fish or a serpent or anything that had lived on land. It was built like hunger made into flesh, ridged limb-like structures fanning outward, layers of muscle that flexed without making ripples, as if water refused to protest its passage. Something touched the back of my head, not a hand in the way humans define hands, but an appendage with intention, gripping without fingers. It pulled once, gently, like a reminder that resistance had never been an option. The ocean folded open soundlessly beneath me, and I dropped without a splash, as if swallowed by a throat instead of water. For one instant, before the dark erased everything, the humming inside my skull cut off, not because it ended, but because the sound shifted to the world above me. The song rose through the air, louder than ever, as though the moment I disappeared another voice had been added to the chorus. And in that final second of lightless sinking, I realized the most horrifying truth. The singers were not buried in the deep. They were singing from inside the thing that had taken me.